Ethan Ward moved through the palace corridor with the soft, practiced steps of someone who had learned to survive by being invisible. The Aurelian crown was a starship of impossible beauty, walls shimmering like liquid crystal, ceilings alive with drifting lights, but none of it belonged to him. He was a janitor, a human laborer assigned to keep the floors polished and the nobles undisturbed. Yet it was here, in these polished corridors, that he found a strange kind of peace. No one looked at him, no one questioned him, and no one expected him to speak. He adjusted the small maintenance flashlight clipped to his belt, the only piece of equipment he truly trusted. Most humans used the cleaning drones, but Ethan preferred doing things himself. Machines didn't notice the small things, the forgotten corners, the faint cracks, or the whispers of stories hidden behind them. And today, as he walked the quiet north wing, long abandoned by most Aurelians, he noticed something else. Footsteps. Light, hesitant, dragging slightly to the side. He paused. No guards patrolled this hall. No nobles came here. Yet someone stood around the bend, breathing softly, as if listening to the ceiling. Ethan stepped forward, and the figure came into view. A girl, tall and luminous-skinned like all Aurelians, wrapped in a pale silver cloak. Her eyes, however, caught him off guard. They were unfocused, clouded with a faint iridescence that reflected no light at all. She wasn't facing him, but the wall, fingertips brushing across its surface. Princess Lura. Ethan froze. Every human aboard the ship knew her title. The Queen's only daughter. Born without the bioluminescent sight that defined her species. A royal with a flaw so profound it was spoken of only in whispers. He should have turned around. Humans were forbidden to approach the royal family without escort. But something in the way she held herself, slightly trembling, leaning too heavily on the wall, stirred a quiet worry he couldn't ignore. Then she slipped. The polished floor betrayed her, and she stumbled over the shallow groove where crystal met metal. Ethan reacted before thinking, stepping forward and catching her by the arm. Her cloak shifted, revealing the faint outline of delicate bones and skin that seemed more fragile than the rest of her people. Her head jerked sharply in his direction. "You," she whispered, voice tight with alarm. "Light. Don't use the light." Ethan blinked, confused. He hadn't even touched the flashlight yet. I'm sorry," he said gently. "I didn't mean to frighten you. I just didn't want you to fall." She didn't answer, only turned her face more fully toward him. Though she couldn't see his expression, he felt as though she was searching for something just beneath his voice, as if she saw in sound rather than light. "I'm going to let go," he added softly. "You're safe." He released her arms slowly. She stayed still for a moment, listening, almost sensing the air shift around him. Then she took a small step back, putting distance between them. "You should not be here," she murmured. "This corridor is dangerous for those who cannot see the truth." The wording struck him as odd. "I just clean here," he replied, forcing a calm smile even though she couldn't see it. "Dangerous how?" Before she could respond, a soft vibration rippled along the wall. Ethan had felt nothing like it before. Lura stiffened, turning toward the faint hum. "It's close," she whispered. "What is?" Ethan asked. Instead of answering, she reached toward him suddenly, too suddenly, and her wrist brushed against the flashlight clipped to his belt. Her entire posture changed. "No," she cried, stumbling back. "Don't turn it on. It's only a maintenance light," he said, bewildered. "It won't hurt. It will reveal things you are not ready to see." The fear in her voice wasn't directed at him. It was directed at the corridor itself. At something unseen. Something she sensed but he couldn't. The vibration grew stronger. Instinct took over. Ethan unclipped the flashlight, not to use it, but to step protectively between her and whatever might be approaching. He didn't know why. He didn't know what she meant. But something primal in him refused to leave her standing alone in a hallway that made even the floor tremble. That was when he heard the footsteps, too many footsteps, approaching fast. An Aurelian guard rounded the corner, then another, then 4 more, all armed, their luminous armor gleaming like shards of a captured star. The lead guard's eyes locked onto Ethan instantly. You, the guard barked. Away from the princess. Ethan raised his hands, startled. I wasn't, she slipped, and I. Princess Lura moved forward quickly. He helped me. He didn't. But the guards didn't let her finish. Two of them grabbed Ethan by the arms, twisting painfully. Another snatched the flashlight from his hand and examined it with suspicion, as if it were a weapon. Ethan's heart hammered. He knew how this would look, a human touching the princess. A human alone in an unguarded corridor. A human with a device she feared. Your Majesty will decide your fate, the guard hissed. They dragged him forward, ignoring his protests, ignoring Lura's attempts to speak. The corridor lights dimmed slightly as they passed, and for a fleeting moment Ethan looked back at the princess. She stood perfectly still, face turned toward him, not blindly, but as if following a sound only she could hear. She whispered something he couldn't make out, a warning or perhaps a plea. Then she faded behind a curtain of armored bodies. Ethan wasn't afraid of punishment. He'd accepted his place aboard this ship long ago. But the look on her face, the quiet dread, convinced him of one thing. Whatever happened in that corridor, it was not about him. It was about her. And whatever she sensed in the darkness hadn't gone away. It was getting closer. Ethan didn't expect the interrogation chamber to be quiet. On the Aurelian crown, silence was a sign of importance. Only high-ranking officials were granted the privilege of speaking without being overheard. The room itself glowed with a faint violet hue, a color that distorted depth and made shadows curl unnaturally along the floor. He sat on a thin metal bench, wrists locked into a restraint coil that hummed faintly. Hours passed with no questions. No accusations. Just silence thick enough to make him doubt his own memory. Then the door slid open. Not a guard this time. Princess Lura stepped in. Her cloak trailed slightly behind her, the edges brushing the glowing floor, and though her gaze remained unfocused, she seemed to navigate the room with a certainty that contradicted her blindness. Ethan straightened instinctively, struggling to decide whether to speak or wait. You should not be treated like this, she said softly. But I was not allowed to intervene. He exhaled slowly. I didn't mean to frighten you. Or break any rules. I know, she replied. You did nothing wrong. It is what you saw, or almost saw, that frightened them. There it was again. The implication that something unseen had been in the hallway. Something only she could perceive. Princess, Ethan said carefully, what did I almost see? She hesitated, stepping closer until the violet glow painted delicate shadows along her cheekbones. Her voice lowered. Light. Ethan blinked. Light. A kind of light no one else can detect, she continued. Not my people. Not yours. She lifted her hand, fingers trembling faintly. Only those born with broken sight can sense it, or those with minds quiet enough to notice what lies between wavelengths. It made no sense. He wasn't special. He wasn't gifted. He was a janitor. And yet something in the way she spoke, the way her voice thinned slightly as if afraid of being overheard, made him lean in unconsciously. When I touched your device, she whispered, I felt the distortion again. The same distortion that surrounded you. You felt something around me? Ethan asked. Yes. A flicker. Like a star hiding behind your shadow. And when you nearly used the light, her breath faltered. It would have revealed what follows me. A chill prickled down Ethan's spine. What follows you? The reason my mother keeps me sealed away from the rest of the ship. Now Ethan understood. Not her blindness, her difference. The Queen wasn't hiding her weakness. She was hiding something far more dangerous. Something connected to her daughter that stalked the palace corridors like a silent predator. Before Ethan could question further, the floor's glow trembled in a slow pulse. Once, twice, like a heartbeat. Lura's expression tightened. It's here, she whispered. Ethan scanned the chamber, but he saw nothing. No movement, no shimmer. Only the princess turning her head slowly, following something invisible. It reacts to illumination, she said. And your light would have made it real. Ethan froze. Then why bring me here? Why talk to me? Because you were not afraid, she answered. Everyone else screams when they sense the disturbance. But you acted like someone who has lived with shadows for a long time. Her hand reached toward his restraints, fingers brushing the metal coil. It clicked softly and released. She stepped back, uncertain, as if expecting him to recoil. Instead, Ethan stood. What do you need me to do? Lura inhaled sharply, surprised by his steadiness. Believe me, she murmured, that is already more than I expected. The floor trembled again, stronger this time. The room's violet glow dimmed at the edges, as though something enormous had pressed against the walls from the outside. Ethan heard nothing, but he felt pressure, an ache behind his eyes, a pulling sensation deep in his ribs. Lura staggered slightly, clutching the edge of the bench. Ethan caught her before she slipped. Her hands were icy. It's trying to separate us, she whispered. It feeds on fear and isolation. Ethan held her steady. Then it picked the wrong people. A faint smile flickered across her lips, brief, fragile. Suddenly, a piercing noise rang through the speaker panel overhead, a security alarm, sharp and urgent. Guards shouted in the corridor beyond the door. Something slammed into the walls, making the lights flicker wildly. Lura turned toward Ethan, voice trembling. If that light of yours truly reveals what others cannot see, then you may be the only one who can show them the truth. He looked down at his belt, the flashlight still missing, confiscated by the guards. But instinct whispered that the light she spoke of wasn't entirely mechanical. Maybe it had been in him the whole time. Another impact shook the room. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Lura reached for his hand, her voice barely a breath. Ethan, don't let them take me back into the dark. He squeezed her hand in return. Then we find the light. Together. The chamber door began to melt inward, as if something was burning through it from the other side. The door finally gave way, with a sound like metal sighing under the weight of centuries. Ethan braced himself, shielding Princess Lura as the molten edges dripped and cooled on the glowing floor. But instead of a monster, a dark wave, or some cosmic force waiting beyond the breach, it was something far more human. 3 high-ranking Aurelian ministers in ceremonial armor, flanked by elite guards whose armor shimmered like fractured starlight. Minister Vale, the Queen's most trusted advisor, stepped forward. His eyes, narrow, cold, calculating, did not drift to Ethan first. They landed on Lura as though she were a smudge on an otherwise pristine painting. Your Highness, Vale said with a bow sharp enough to cut, it is unsafe for you to wander without escort. The Queen has been most distressed. Lura stiffened. Ethan could feel the tremor through her hand, but not from fear. Rather from fury she couldn't voice openly. You knew what was following me, she said quietly. You knew, and yet you let it roam freely. Vale's smile didn't reach his eyes. It is your condition that attracts anomalies, Princess. We contain what we can. His gaze shifted slowly to Ethan. This human, however, was never meant to be part of the containment protocol. Ethan met his stare, without flinching. Containment? You're talking about her like she's a hazard. She is one, Vale said calmly. Just not in the way she believes. Before Lura could protest, another figure entered the ruined chamber. Regent Maleth, the Queen's cousin and acting commander of royal security. He carried himself like a blade wrapped in silk, dangerous, polished, and patient. We warned Her Majesty that the child would become a liability, Maleth said. Blindness we could accept, but attracting rift echoes. His lips curled. That is something no empire can tolerate. Lura stepped forward, chin lifted. The echo is not bound to me. It is bound to the ship. You're hiding something far worse than my presence. Ethan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. He could feel her rage, her frustration at being silenced her whole life. Vale turned to Maleth. Take the human to detention chamber 5. He has seen too much. Guards moved in immediately. Ethan prepared to fight, futile as it might be, but Lura seized his arm with unexpected strength. No, she said, her voice sharper than he had ever heard it. He's the only one who can see the distortion clearly. You need him more than you admit. Malith laughed softly. A janitor? Do not romanticize this, princess. He is disposable. The insult rolled off Ethan, but Lura reacted as if struck. She stepped in front of him defiantly. He saw what your elite guard could not. He sensed the disturbance before your sensors even flickered. That makes him useful. She turned her head slightly toward Ethan. And, perhaps, dangerous to your lives. The ministers exchanged brief glances, too brief, too controlled. Ethan saw it then, the flicker of fear. Not of Lura, not of him, but of truth. What exactly are you hiding? Ethan asked. What is following her? Vale's eyes hardened. The echo is a side effect of an energy breach long classified. It is contained. Your interference, however, threatens the stability we have maintained for years. Lura's voice trembled. You call that stability? Living under constant surveillance? Being locked away so no one learns what I can see? Malith stepped closer. You see nothing, princess. Your blindness twists your perception of reality. Then why? Ethan cut in. Does the echo grow stronger whenever she's afraid? Why does it react to her voice? Why? Enough, Vale snapped, cold authority cutting through the room. Take him. 2 guards grabbed Ethan. He struggled, but they were stronger, until the chamber itself trembled. Not from impact. Not from an explosion. From the echo. Lura gasped and clutched her head. For the first time, the ministers faltered. The guards hesitated. A thin crack of luminescent distortion shimmered across the air, faint but undeniable, like a fracture in the shape of the world. Ethan felt it too, an ache behind his ribs, a pull like gravity bending wrong. Do you feel that? He hissed at the ministers. That's not a side effect. That's a creature. Malith's facade cracked for a moment. The rift breach was sealed. The queen ordered. The queen was lied to, Lura whispered through clenched teeth. The distortion pulsed again, and the chamber lights flickered violently. Ethan stepped in front of Lura on instinct, shielding her from the tearing air. Vale snapped an order. Stabilize the perimeter. Move them to containment. But the guards hesitated. The shimmering crack now hung between them like a threat made tangible. Ethan felt the flashlight missing from his belt like a phantom limb. He didn't know why, but something told him he needed it. Needed light. Lura gripped his sleeve. Ethan, do not let them take us. You're the only one who doesn't fear the rift's presence. Her trust hit him harder than any guard's grip. He turned toward the ministers. You're losing control of whatever you buried under this court. Vale's jaw clenched. We buried nothing. We are preventing chaos. By imprisoning her? Ethan shot back. By lying to the queen? By pretending the rift doesn't exist. Silence. Dangerous silence. Then Minister Vale spoke in a low, lethal whisper. If you had any idea what lies beyond that fracture, you would beg for the princess to be contained forever. Lura's voice rose, trembling but resolute. The echo is not trying to destroy me. It is calling to me. The floor cracked. The distortion widened, just a breath. Enough to make every guard step back in horror. Enough to prove everything the ministers denied. Ethan felt Lura's hand tighten around his. For the first time since he arrived on this ship, he understood the real conflict. It wasn't between humans and Aurelians. It wasn't between a janitor and a princess. It was between truth and a kingdom built on fear. And the truth was breaking through. The ship groaned like a wounded giant as the rift widened through the throne hall, its edges glowing with an impossible light that bent the air around it. Guards stumbled backward, their weapons useless against a tear in reality. Ethan felt the pressure again, that heavy, nauseating pull that seemed to target him, dragging at the space behind his ribs. Princess Lura stood beside him, her posture trembling but unbroken, as if the rift were an old enemy she had finally chosen to face, without flinching. Minister Vale shouted orders, but his voice was swallowed by the rising hum of the fracture. The echo, the creature, the intelligence, the presence hiding within that distortion, was emerging. Slowly, purposefully. The court panicked, but the rift did not move toward them. It drifted toward Lura, like a wounded animal seeking something familiar. "It knows me," Laura whispered. "It's followed me my whole life because I'm the only one who can sense it clearly." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Then why is it growing stronger now?" She turned her blind eyes toward the pulsing tear. "Because it's dying. And it's trying to finish its last connection." Vale heard her and paled. "If it merges with her, the breach will destabilize the core. The ship will collapse." His gaze snapped to Ethan. "Stop her. Do something." Ethan didn't listen to him. He listened to her. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Laura released his hand and stepped forward. The echo never meant harm, but the court trapped it with their experiments. Now it's unraveling. If it collapses fully, it will take the ship with it. Ethan understood then. Vale didn't want to contain the rift. He wanted to hide it. His lies had brought them here, to this moment where the ship trembled on the edge of annihilation. Ethan scanned the throne room, searching desperately for something, anything, that could shift the balance. And that's when he saw it. His flashlight, still lying on the steps where the guards had left confiscated items earlier. A simple tool. But in Laura's hands, it had sparked the truth. He sprinted for it. The rift immediately responded, twisting violently, as though angered by his movement. Guards fell to their knees, clutching their skulls. Vale tried to intercept him, but Ethan dodged past the minister with a burst of adrenaline he didn't know he still had. He snatched the flashlight from the floor. "Ethan," Laura called. He turned to her, and she nodded once, trusting him fully. Ethan clicked the flashlight on. The beam sliced through the distortion like a spear, revealing within it a swirling mass of shapes, memories, forms, fragments of something ancient and wounded. The echo recoiled, but not in fear. In recognition. In longing. The light steadied its chaotic pulse, drawing it toward Ethan instead of Laura. Laura gasped. "It's bonding to you." The air shuddered with a painful resonance that nearly knocked Ethan off his feet. He forced himself forward, each step a battle against crushing pressure. The light flickered as the rift attempted to tear it apart, yet his fingers refused to let go. He wasn't special. He was a janitor. But he could face darkness because he had lived in it often enough to stop fearing it. "Come on," he whispered to the echo. "If you want to end this, take it from me. Not her." The rift lunged. It hit him like a star collapsing. His body convulsed as impossible energy surged into him, ripping through every nerve. The flashlight shattered in his hand, exploding into sparks that hung in the air like tiny, suspended suns. Ethan's knees buckled. Laura screamed his name. The world flickered. But the ship stopped trembling. The rift began to shrink. Laura reached him, her hands cupping his face. "Don't you dare let go," she whispered, voice breaking. "You showed it mercy when no one else would. That's why it chose you." Ethan tried to answer, but only a strangled breath escaped. His vision narrowed as the rift contracted into a small, shimmering sphere that hovered above his chest. It pulsed once softly like a heartbeat, and then it dissolved into a thin line of light that slid into Ethan, disappearing just beneath his sternum. Silence swept the throne room. Ethan collapsed. Laura caught him, lowering him gently to the floor. He was cold, pale, barely breathing. Vale approached cautiously, but Laura's expression was lethal. "If you touch him," she warned, "I will expose every lie you have ever told my mother." Before Vale could argue, another presence entered the chamber, the Queen. Viralis stood frozen at the sight of her unconscious daughter holding a dying human. Her gaze darted to the shattered flashlight, the fading glow of the rift, the trembling ministers. "I was deceived," the Queen whispered. Laura looked up at her, tears streaking her cheeks. "Mother, he saved us. He saved the entire crown." The Queen knelt beside them, placing a hand over Ethan's heart. Her power, a shimmering golden energy, flowed into him, weaving itself around the remnants of the rift's imprint. Ethan's breathing returned in small, uneven gasps. "Why would he sacrifice himself?" the Queen asked softly. Laura held Ethan's hand tightly. "Because he saw me. Not as a defect. Not as a burden. As someone worth protecting." The queen closed her eyes, the weight of her mistakes settling on her shoulders. When she opened them again, her voice carried the full authority of a ruler. As of this moment, she declared, humans are no longer servants of the Aurelian crown. They are our allies. And this man, Ethan Ward, will be honored as the protector who faced the rift and prevailed. The court froze in stunned disbelief. Ethan stirred in Lura's arms. His voice was faint, barely a whisper. Did it work? Lura smiled through tears.
Yes.
It's gone. We're safe. He exhaled in relief and let his eyes close again, but this time not from pain, only exhaustion. Lura pressed her forehead to his, her voice a fragile promise. I won't let them hide you away like they tried to hide me. From now on, we face the light together. Outside, the ship began to stabilize. The echo was gone. The lies were unraveling. And a new truth, one born from courage and compassion, was taking root. The janitor, who was supposed to be invisible, had changed an empire.